Serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer was murdered this morning at the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage. Convicted wife killer Jesse Anderson also seriously injured. He has been transported to University Hospital in Madison now.
The gym at Columbia Correctional Institution was eerily quiet. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, the only sound. Then came a single unmistakable noise, a loud crash. Moments later, a notorious killer, infamous for his gruesome crimes, would be found lifeless. Jeffrey Dahmer, the so-called Milwaukee Cannibal, was dead. But what led to this shocking event? Was it justice, revenge, or something else entirely? In 1994, Dahmer, convicted of 17 murders that included unimaginable horrors, had spent years in prison, locked away from the world. Despite the grotesque nature of his crimes, Dahmer was not left in peace behind bars. His infamy followed him, making him a target among fellow inmates. But no one could have predicted the way his story would end. After a year in solitary confinement for his own safety, Dahmer was moved to the general population. Many believed this was a risky decision, given his past, but Dahmer seemed eager to return to a semblance of normal life. What he didn't know was that the very people he'd be placed among were already forming their own opinions about him. Among those assigned to work alongside Dahmer that fateful morning was Christopher Scarver, a convicted murderer with a history of mental health issues. Scarver had already expressed his growing disgust with Dahmer's behavior. Dahmer's disturbing jokes, often mimicking the very crimes that had earned him his notoriety, did not sit well with him. As the tension between them built, it became clear that Dahmer's fate was sealed. As they entered the gym that morning, none of them knew that the end was drawing near. The chain of events that would unfold would answer questions that many had been asking. Could Dahmer's death be seen as justice for his victims? Or was it something darker, a tragedy born out of revenge and mental instability? The prison walls held the answers, and those answers were about to be revealed in the most unexpected way.
Welcome back to Fatal Verdict. In today's video, I will take you through the timeline of the life of Jeffrey Dahmer, from his disturbing rise to infamy, his eventual arrest, and his time behind bars. We'll break down the events leading to his shocking death in prison, examining the psychological factors, the prison dynamics, and the impact his actions had on those around him. You'll also hear the accounts from those who were involved in his final moments. As we explore these chilling details, we'll dive into the investigation, the theories surrounding his death, and the aftermath that still raises questions to this day. By the end of this video, you'll have a clearer picture of what happened that fateful morning in 1994. We want to hear from you. Drop a comment below letting us know where you're watching from. And for those who haven't subscribed yet, please tell us why in the comment section. Your feedback is important to us. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're interested in more true crime documentaries like this one.
Jeffrey Dahmer's name became synonymous with some of the most horrific crimes in U.S. history. From 1978 to 1991, Dahmer was convicted of murdering 17 young men and boys. His brutal actions, which involved luring, killing, and dismembering his victims, shocked the nation. When he was arrested in 1991, Dahmer's conviction left the public grappling with how such unimaginable acts could be carried out by a man who seemed so ordinary. Sentenced to multiple life terms in prison, Dahmer's life behind bars, however, was far from peaceful. Upon his incarceration, Dahmer was initially placed in solitary confinement for his own protection. His notoriety as the Milwaukee Cannibal made him a target within the prison system, and for a time he was kept isolated from the general population. But after a year in isolation, Dahmer requested to be transferred into the general population, seeking to escape the confines of solitary. Prison officials granted his request, though some questioned whether this was a dangerous decision. Dahmer was a known figure, and his crimes were among the most horrific the country had ever seen. Dahmer's behavior in prison raised concerns. He was reportedly quiet, kept to himself, but he also displayed a dark sense of humor that unsettled many of the other inmates. He would sometimes mock the nature of his crimes, which made him even more isolated. His jokes, however, were seen as disturbing and provoked an increasingly negative response from fellow inmates. As Dahmer adjusted to his new surroundings in the general population, tensions began to rise. One of the inmates who had begun to take notice of Dahmer's behavior was Christopher Scarver. Scarver, like many others, had spent years in the prison system, but his background was particularly dark. Convicted for murder, Scarver had a violent past that followed him into the prison system. His mental health issues, notably schizophrenia, made him a volatile presence in the prison. Scarver was diagnosed with this condition, which he later claimed contributed to his actions in Dahmer's death.
Scarver had been growing more disturbed by Dahmer's behavior, particularly his tendency to make jokes about his crimes. Dahmer's constant jokes about cannibalism and mockery of the atrocities he had committed became the tipping point. Scarver, who had grown disgusted by Dahmer's actions, said that he felt compelled to act. Scarver later claimed he had heard voices telling him that Dahmer needed to be stopped. In addition to Scarver, Jesse Anderson was another inmate involved in the prison work detail on that fateful day. Anderson, like Dahmer, had been convicted of a brutal crime, murdering his wife. He had also been serving a life sentence. Anderson's involvement in the incident was secondary, but his presence on that morning set the stage for what would unfold. The conditions at Columbia Correctional played a significant role in the escalating tensions. The prison was overcrowded and understaffed, creating an environment ripe for conflict. Violence in the facility was common, and the rules of survival within the prison were unforgiving.
17 young men murdered and dismembered, many of their remains found in the apartment of Jeffrey Dahmer at 25th and Kilbourne in Milwaukee. Now, Dahmer confessed to picking up young men at gay bars and young boys and lured them into his apartment where he strangled and dismembered them and engaged in cannibalism. Skulls and other parts of the body were found in his apartment. Dahmer pleaded guilty to the murders that spanned the 10 years in Ohio and Wisconsin. His insanity defense.
Dahmer's notoriety had made him a walking target, and Scarver's growing frustrations had reached a boiling point. Dahmer, for all his fame, was now at the mercy of those around him. As the days passed, Dahmer's actions and the rising resentment among inmates built to a peak. Scarver, in particular, found Dahmer's mocking behavior unforgivable. Their paths would cross in a way that would forever change the course of the prison's history. On November 28, 1994, the moment of confrontation arrived. Dahmer, Anderson, and Scarver were assigned to a work detail cleaning the prison gymnasium. For Dahmer and Anderson, it would seem like any other day, mundane, routine. But for Scarver, it would be the day he acted on his growing anger. Scarver later claimed that Dahmer's behavior on that morning was the final straw. Scarver reported that Dahmer continued his disturbing jokes even as the three men worked together. It was during this time that Scarver, in an act of extreme violence, attacked Dahmer and Anderson. According to Scarver, he acted not only out of anger, but because he believed it was a divine command to end Dahmer's life. As the work shift ended, so did Dahmer's life. Scarver had taken matters into his own hands. Dahmer, once a figure of terror on the outside, was now at the mercy of the harsh realities of prison life. Scarver's actions were swift and brutal, and the repercussions would be felt throughout the entire prison system.
Let's be real. Was Dahmer's death in prison really justice? Many people are quick to say that his brutal killing was deserved, but is that really what justice looks like? He was under state protection, so shouldn't the prison system have kept him safe from vigilante justice? The fact that Dahmer was killed so easily in prison raises serious questions about the flaws in the system. Then there's Christopher Scarver. Did he truly act on divine orders, or was this just his way of getting revenge? Can we really condone an inmate taking justice into his own hands? What if Scarver was just a man who couldn't let go of his own anger? Does that make him a hero, or does it make the prison system a breeding ground for unchecked violence? And honestly, what if Dahmer had lived? Would we have seen any form of real rehabilitation, or did his death end a conversation about what truly drives someone like him? Was it just an easy way to shut down accountability? So here's the real question. Was Dahmer's death the closure his victims needed, or was it just a convenient escape for everyone involved? What do you think? Was it justice, or just another failure of the system?
Let's be real. Was Dahmer's death in prison really justice? Many people are quick to say that his brutal killing was deserved, but is that really what justice looks like? He was under state protection, so shouldn't the prison system have kept him safe from vigilante justice? The fact that Dahmer was killed so easily in prison raises serious questions about the flaws in the system. Then there's Christopher Scarver. Did he truly act on divine orders, or was this just his way of getting revenge? Can we really condone an inmate taking justice into his own hands? What if Scarver was just a man who couldn't let go of his own anger? Does that make him a hero, or does it make the prison system a breeding ground for unchecked violence? And honestly, what if Dahmer had lived? Would we have seen any form of real rehabilitation, or did his death end a conversation about what truly drives someone like him? Was it just an easy way to shut down accountability? So here's the real question. Was Dahmer's death the closure his victims needed, or was it just a convenient escape for everyone involved? What do you think? Was it justice, or just another failure of the system? On the morning of November 28, 1994, the atmosphere in Columbia Correctional Institution was charged with tension. Jeffrey Dahmer, Jesse Anderson, and Christopher Scarver were assigned to a routine work detail, cleaning the gymnasium. They were left unsupervised for about 20 minutes, a decision that would set the stage for Dahmer's fatal end. While the task seemed harmless enough, the dynamics between these three men were far from ordinary. Dahmer, infamous for his past crimes, had a reputation that made him a target within the prison system. His interactions with other inmates were often marked by an unsettling behavior, including inappropriate jokes about his crimes, which did not sit well with many of those around him.
Scarver, who had been in prison for a violent crime, had grown increasingly disturbed by Dahmer's actions. Scarver had struggled with mental health issues. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia and later claimed that he had been acting on what he believed were divine instructions when he attacked Dahmer. His anger had been building over time, fueled by Dahmer's behavior, which Scarver found deeply offensive. On that day, Dahmer reportedly continued to make light of his past crimes, using his notorious reputation as the subject of his jokes. Scarver found this mocking behavior intolerable. According to Scarver, he decided to take action, feeling a sense of urgency to stop Dahmer from continuing his unsettling antics. Scarver later described the incident as an act that was forced upon him by something greater than himself. He said he was acting on divine orders when he struck Dahmer. Scarver used a metal bar from a nearby weight machine to attack Dahmer. The action was swift and caught Dahmer off guard. Anderson, who had been working alongside them, was also struck during the confrontation. However, the attack on Dahmer was far more intense. The assault happened quickly, and by the time prison staff arrived at the scene, Dahmer was unresponsive. He was immediately taken to the infirmary, but despite efforts to save him, Dahmer was pronounced dead from head injuries about an hour later. Anderson, who had been struck as well, would succumb to his injuries 2 days later in the prison hospital.
The attack left the prison system in shock. Dahmer's death sparked a series of investigations within the prison as staff scrambled to understand how an inmate could be killed so easily under their watch. Scarver's version of events added a layer of complexity to the situation. While he claimed his actions were driven by a higher purpose, many questioned whether Dahmer's death was an act of justice or a result of a deeply flawed system. After the violent attack on November 28, 1994, the prison immediately began an internal investigation to determine how the events unfolded. The most pressing question was how such an incident could have occurred under the supervision of prison staff. The guards had left the inmates unsupervised for about 20 minutes, which ultimately led to the attack. This lapse in security raised serious concerns about the prison's ability to manage high-profile inmates like Dahmer. The incident exposed significant flaws in the prison system, particularly regarding its failure to ensure safety for inmates, even those as notorious as Dahmer. In the aftermath, Christopher Scarver, the man responsible for the attack, gave his version of what transpired. According to Scarver, Dahmer had been making jokes about his gruesome crimes, continuing to act provocatively in front of other inmates. Dahmer's behavior, particularly his lack of remorse and his disturbing sense of humor, seemed to fuel Scarver's anger. Scarver later stated that he believed he was acting on divine orders, which is a claim that added a layer of complexity to the situation. Scarver's mental health played a crucial role in understanding his actions. Diagnosed with schizophrenia, Scarver had a history of mental health struggles, which some believe may have contributed to his decision to attack Dahmer. But was it truly divine intervention, or was Scarver's anger and mental instability the driving force behind his actions? The forensic findings confirmed that Dahmer died from blunt force trauma to the head. The nature of the injuries indicated a sudden and intense attack. Scarver claimed that he used a metal bar from a nearby weight machine to strike both Dahmer and Anderson. The fact that no weapon was found near Anderson led investigators to believe that both men had been attacked with the same object. Scarver's actions appeared to be deliberate, and the scene suggested a carefully planned assault. Yet questions remain. Was this act of violence driven by a deep-seated personal grievance, or did Scarver believe he was fulfilling a higher purpose?
The prison system's role in the attack became a point of intense scrutiny. Many wondered whether the facility had done enough to protect Dahmer, especially given his notoriety. Dahmer's presence in the general population without proper supervision was seen by many as a recipe for disaster. Should the prison have taken additional precautions to prevent such an event from happening? This question lingered long after the investigation. As the investigation continued, several theories emerged about Scarver's motive. Was it retribution for Dahmer's offensive jokes and behavior, or was it a personal act of justice? Some suggested that Scarver, disillusioned by Dahmer's lack of remorse, saw his actions as a form of punishment. Others argued that it was an outburst of rage, fueled by Scarver's own struggles with mental health. Could it have been a breakdown, an explosive reaction to years of emotional and psychological turmoil? Or was it something deeper, a profound sense of justice that pushed Scarver to take matters into his own hands? Despite these theories, one thing remains clear. Dahmer's death exposed deep flaws in the prison system. It raised uncomfortable questions about the nature of justice, retribution, and the role of the prison system in managing dangerous criminals. Was Scarver a vigilante delivering justice, or was he a man lost in his own mental struggles, acting out in a moment of rage? The truth remains elusive, but the aftermath of this event continues to spark debate and raise questions that have yet to be answered.
Jeffrey Dahmer's death sparked divided reactions from both the public and the media. For some, It was viewed as a form of justice, a long-awaited conclusion to the horrific crimes Dahmer had committed. Many believed his death behind bars was the final consequence for a man whose actions had shocked the world. Media coverage intensified, with widespread debates about whether Dahmer's death was a fair retribution or a sign of a failed system. Questions about prison security surfaced. How could an inmate so notorious and dangerous be left unsupervised long enough for such an attack to happen? For the families of Dahmer's victims, the reaction was complex. Some felt that his death brought closure, believing it was a necessary end to a man whose atrocities had caused irreparable harm. Others, however, saw Dahmer's death as an unresolved tragedy, a moment where true justice could never be served. Was his violent end truly a measure of accountability, or did it deny the victims' families the chance for a complete judicial resolution? Was the prison system responsible for failing to provide the necessary protection, allowing this death to unfold the way it did? Christopher Scarver's role in Dahmer's death remains controversial. Some view Scarver as a figure of retribution, someone who took matters into his own hands to end Dahmer's actions in a final, irreversible way. But there are those who believe Scarver's motivations were less about justice and more about his own mental health struggles. With his schizophrenia diagnosis, Scarver's account of the attack, claiming to have been guided by divine orders, raises serious questions about whether his actions were driven by a delusional state of mind or a sincere belief that he was doing what was morally right.
Dahmer's death also brought serious reflection on the American prison system. The questions surrounding the lack of protection Dahmer received, even in his high-security placement, exposed significant flaws. Was the system responsible for keeping him safe? Many questioned whether the nature of his crimes and public notoriety warranted more secure arrangements to prevent an incident like this. Dahmer's killing left the public grappling with the question, could the prison system have done more to prevent this outcome? Or was it simply a consequence of the overcrowded and underfunded facilities that fail to effectively protect all inmates, regardless of their past? Was Jeffrey Dahmer's death in prison really justice, or just a failure of the system? We like to say he got what he deserved, but was it truly justice when an inmate, someone with mental health issues, decided his fate? Does the system really let anyone play judge, jury, and executioner because of personal grievances, especially when that person is Dahmer? Dahmer's death was a convenient escape for a system that failed to properly handle him. His victims' families didn't get the closure they deserved, and we'll never know if Dahmer would have truly faced up to his actions. Was his death the end he deserved, or did the system fail to deliver real accountability? Was Dahmer's death retribution, or just an excuse for revenge? Who's truly to blame? The prison? The killer? Or the system that let it happen?
Jeffrey Dahmer's life ended violently, but the questions surrounding his death still echo. Was it an act of justice, a form of retribution, or simply the tragic conclusion to a life consumed by horrific actions? His death inside a maximum security prison seemed inevitable to some, given the nature of his past, while others saw it as another failure of the justice system to properly handle someone of his notoriety. Dahmer's death may have closed the chapter on his own life, but the impact of his crimes and the way they were handled continues to raise uncomfortable questions about accountability. The unresolved nature of his killing, whether it was an act of vengeance or a deeply troubling personal decision, remains a haunting element of his story. Dahmer's legacy isn't just about the horrors he committed, but also about the lasting questions surrounding his death and its broader implications for the prison system and criminal justice. The system designed to keep the most dangerous people in check failed in this instance, and Dahmer's death became another chapter in the broader narrative of prison violence, inmate safety, and retribution. We may never fully understand the motivations of those involved, but one thing is certain: Dahmer's life and death continue to stir deep reflections on the limits of justice and the complexity of the system that failed him and his victims alike. Thank you for watching. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe for more true crime documentaries that dig deep into the stories that leave us questioning everything.